Hey, I'm Seth,
And I'm Phil.
and we're
Becoming Relevant. Today's topic is guitars.
Welcome to Becoming Relevant, the show where our guests shed light on niche topics as well as give a new perspective on broader ones.
We're joined this episode by August Jeske.
Hey, August.
Hello, guys.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I'm
Very
excited.
cool.
And you're going to talk to us about...
I'm going to talk to you tonight about guitars. My involvement with guitars prior to the last year and a half, 2 years, was mostly in the academic sense. I knew that they had strings. I knew that they had little fiddly bits on the top, and I knew that they made a sound if you put your fingers on them in a certain way. I didn't pick up a guitar, well, not seriously, until I was, I guess, a junior in high school. My mom had a old American-made Stella Harmony steel reinforced neck. They were sold through Sears and Roebuck. And that was the guitar that she got when she was younger than I am. She was probably about 15 years old when she got it. And she, for whatever reason, held on to it all these years. She never played, but like most parents, you know, you hope that your children will pick up the skills that you didn't have so you can live vicariously through them. So I liked the look of guitars. I liked the idea of them. And so there was little me holding this thing taller than I was and making a horrible noise, you know, saying that I was practicing. And then my mom would lock it back in the case and it would go away for a while. Like most good things happened organically, and I realized that's what a lot of people who have startup businesses say. You know, it's like, well, it happened very organically. You know, it's like they use words like grassroots and things like that. Like I stumbled into this completely blind. It fell into my lap, and fortunately, I can say with a degree of pride that I have the good sense to take it and run with it. My wife and I had just moved into our first apartment after getting married. I'd been doing some digging around the last couple months of college, looking to try and buy some at least more decent guitars than the things that I'd had up to that point. However, I had a college graduate's budget, which meant that anything past the range of about $300 just couldn't even think about it. Like thinking that I'm slumming, essentially, you know, just scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'd bought like a $50 acoustic guitar off of Amazon just to have an acoustic, because everything up to that point was electric. And I had this old beater electric guitar. I'd found it actually in the basement of an abandoned house. This guitar was in pieces. It was an early 2000s Ibanez Artcore semi-hollow body with a center block. This thing was in pieces. It had no bridge, no tailpiece. The wiring was shot, was missing tuners. Somebody had carved into it with what looked like a thumbtack. They doodled on it with silver Sharpie, nail polish, like, you know, carved a name of that. It was covered in gum. But I mean, it's a otherwise perfectly decent instrument. This is, you know, the way I think. It's like, this thing is beat to hell. It's perfectly good. I'm not going to leave it here. So, you know, I take it home and held on to it for a couple months, you know, took it with me when my wife and I got married, intending finally to restore it. And eventually I did, to the point where I was able to get the parts for it. And, you know, that was sort of my introduction to hunting for hard to find or out of production parts. You know, the bridge, Ibanez hadn't made it for something like 10 years, and I finally hunted it down through a store that specialized in drum parts. I don't know why they had it, but, you know, I got it paid way more than it was worth. Finally, you know, everything was on it, and this thing worked. You know, I'd gotten the wiring working again, and it actually made a noise when you plugged it in. I'd scrubbed it down, cleaned it up as best I could, but it wasn't really my kind of guitar. You know, I'd asked word of mouth. You know, some of my musician friends, if it was something they were interested in, you know, everybody kind of hemmed and hawed, as we know people do. I'd heard a couple months ago of this little website called Reverb. They were not quite still a startup, but they were relatively recent on the scene. They first started up in 2014. And quick crash course for Reverb, they're essentially a giant flea market for anything music related. Memorabilia, primarily instruments, but parts, you know, apparel, things like that. But it's all run by musicians for musicians. Way different from selling a guitar on eBay, or certainly selling a guitar on Craigslist, which plenty of horror stories, just look on Reddit. But Reverb is a very, very classy system. I took the guitar outside. I didn't even have a stand for it. I just propped it up against the outside of the house, and the sun was setting, so it was the golden hour. There was some beautiful, beautiful light. Really made this, frankly, kind of a turd of a guitar look really, really great. Took lots of angles. I didn't sugarcoat the fact that this thing was a beater, and I listed it for $200, which I thought was I thought that I would be lucky to get $200 for this guitar. And I typed up my listing and posted it and walked away expecting that nothing would come of it. 10 minutes later, it was sold, my asking price. 10 minutes.
Wow.
And so from that point on, I was hooked. I had my earnings from that, my payout earnings from Reverb, went right to at that point I didn't have my bank account hooked up to it. So it was sort of just floating in the ether and like, well, what do you want to do with this? Do you want us to transfer this to your bank? And I thought, I'm going to use this as seed money. I'm going to try and invest in, some cheapo stuff, some parts to maybe pimp out things that I have, maybe give them a little more resale value and see where it goes. And that sort of snowballed over the next year and a half as bargain basement beginnings, as you could ask for. Basically just things you'd see at a pawn shop or a flea market to, sort of through no really intention of my own, finding myself in this sort of subculture of music memorabilia and guitar aficionados focusing on weird, groovy Orphan Gear from the 50s up through the 70s, these weird, Japanese and Korean guitars that, look like something that fell from outer space, and they've got 8 different pickups and all these toggle switches and crazy finishes like Avocado Burst and Pelham Blue and things like that, and all of these wild body styles and sounds. And these guitars, they're not in production anymore, so they are collector's items, but they're very affordable in the respect that they are orphan brands. They're not produced anymore. They tend to go for around $300, which, since I've learned, is sort of the sweet spot for the general, music clientele that I ended up catering to, is the crowd who want big noise for little cash. I'm sorry, it's the truth. You don't need to spend more than $600 for a really, really, really good guitar. Doesn't matter if it's electric or acoustic, but $300 is probably right where you need to be, whether you're a beginner or whether you've been playing for 30 years. $300 will get you all the tone and all of the quality of construction that you need. So with that realization that that the guitar market doesn't have to be reserved for people with money to burn. It doesn't have to be reserved for the snobs, for the elitists. You don't have to be a member of the Les Paul Forum and have an original 1954 gold top, that Jimmy Page sneezed on to be taken seriously. I knew that there was a guitar market and that it was very, very large indeed, but I just assumed that Guitar Center was sort of where it ended, where everything was up, everything was brand new. Occasionally there was like the bargain bin where, somebody had drawn on it or something like that, or it had been lightly run over by a truck, stuff like that. And there, it's like, okay, here's this Fender Starcaster, it was in a house fire. 400's the best we can do. That kind of thing. It's like, hey man, that's the best price you're going to get anywhere. $400 for a Fender Starcaster, which sounds marginally better than electrified potato. No thanks. Like, I will stick with the weird, the Normas, the Tescos, the Kingstons, these Japanese guitars, which in many cases sound way better and were built better than their American counterparts. The cool thing about these Orphan guitars is that they have stories. How many people have played them? Where have they traveled before they got to you? And so what if it's a basket case? So what if the wiring's shot? If the neck's cracked, whatever? Like, anything can be fixed if you can learn how to do it. And so I resolved to learn how to do it. And fortunately, I live in an age where there's such a thing called the internet, and I can have the entire sum of human knowledge at my fingertips in something that's smaller than a paperback. So over the last year, I've learned to do a great many things in regards to guitar maintenance and repair, restoration, things like that. If you told me a year ago from today that I would have learned the mechanics of wiring my own pickups. I was dismal at soldering before a year ago, and now I still have the scars to prove it. I've lost most of the feeling in my fingertips. But now, rather than just having a blob of lead, I have something that actually makes noise. Adjusting, tension in necks, truss rod stuff, things like that. Just little things that make all the difference. And I mean, in the true spirit of free market venture capitalism, there's a buyer out there for everything. You just got to find it.
Yep.
And that's the great thing about Reverb that you don't necessarily have with something like eBay, certainly not with Craigslist, where everything's out in the ether there. And you're running the risk of getting shanked in a Walmart parking lot if you go for a meetup, is that Reverb it's a niche platform, obviously. It caters to musicians, but there are so many niches within the niche that it's so easy for someone to find exactly what they're looking for. Like just, you find those keywords that work for you. You make sure that things are bumped where they need to be, where people will see it if they're, traveling the certain corners of the website. And I have had no trouble shifting my inventory, which came as a great surprise, honestly. But that's nice because it means I get to have a revolving door of instruments. It forces me to take time to make room for music in my day-to-day routine. It also keeps me working with my hands, which prior to this point I really wasn't doing as much as I would have liked. And so, this hobby has actually turned into something that actually, can pay the bills. And as of January, Reverb went from being something that I was just putting seed money into and, basically building up inventory, essentially operating as a nonprofit. And then come January, finally, like everything I make, I get to keep, except, for listing fees, because the guys at Reverb have mouths to feed too.
Exactly.
So it's been an interesting ride, very convoluted, if that long rambling story didn't give you the notion of that. But it's been interesting. I certainly wouldn't have expected it to happen the way that it did, but I'm certainly glad that it happened the way that it did, and I wouldn't have had it occur any other way.
Very cool. So you brought with you a guitar, one
Yes.
of your prototypes.
Yes.
Feel free to grab it there.
Yes. This little prelude here is, as I just said, with the money that I've been making off of Reverb, I was able to sink a little out here or there into the possibility of not only expanding inventory, but putting out what eventually might become a personal brand, personally branded guitars, things like that. And it's interesting that I would try to do something like that at this time, because Rolling Stone published an article a couple weeks ago saying that the electric guitar is suffering a long, slow death. Electric guitar sales are the lowest that they've ever been in history, and this is according to Rolling Stone. However, electric guitar sales are the lowest they've ever been for the big conglomerate, so Gibson and Fender, the little guys are doing very well. Independent storefronts like Reverb, brick and mortar music stores are doing very well. Like secondhand guitars are where the money is at right now, because people want something played in. People want something with history. People want something with mojo. There's something great about getting a brand new guitar that's never been touched before, but it's also very sterile. You don't know if it's necessarily going to be a good fit for you. It's not broken in. And this is a problem that many first-time guitarists have, is that they are intimidated by their instruments. They don't want to play them because you have this immaculate thing that came out of the box from the factory, and it still has the stickers on it, and it still has the plastic on the pickups, and it's so wonderful, and you're afraid to breathe on it because it might fog the finish. And so, that's the great thing about a secondhand guitar. You don't care if it falls over. These things are built to last. And so it's also with with the internet and all of the various forums out there, how-tos, the YouTube is a wonderful, wonderful resource for learning how to do things, hence what we're doing right now, little plug for the program. And so I spent a couple months basically feeling around to see how much it would cost to start producing custom guitars in-house. Now, I'm not at the point where I can do that quite yet, but by the time this video is published, I will be. So you can follow some links that will be posted at the end of the video here, and hopefully there'll be some cool stuff for you to check out. But through some of my contacts, actually, I have a wonderful gentleman. His name is Hasso Schrick. He lives in Hamburg, Germany. And he was able to turn me on to a custom shop in Japan who, from time to time, has been known to do work for Peerless Guitars, Unsung Guitars, Samick, Epiphone, Charvel, things like that. And pretty much if you're willing to send them well thought out diagrams, schematics, things like that, and give them a detailed concept of what you would like to produce, they will happily produce as many prototypes as you would need. We exchanged over 100 emails back and forth. They were extremely scrupulous in making sure that all the dimensions were correct and that I would be getting exactly the guitar that I had envisioned. And so after about 6 months in R&D, they sent me the finished product. This is the first signature model for my brand, Frugally Fab Guitars. This is also kind of an ego trip, honestly, angle it out towards the guitar, because it has the Jeske name on the headstock, and it is a signature model. This is the August Jeske Country Scoundrel. It says on the headstock there, that's a shameless ripoff of the Gretsch Country Gentleman, which is probably one of my favorite guitars in the entire world. I've wanted one ever since I saw George Harrison playing one on the Ed Sullivan Show. This is, it borrows some elements from that, but there's enough little tweaks and twists here to make it unique. Simply put, there isn't another guitar like this on the face of the earth. Mahogany construction, maple cap, bird's eye maple neck, geared imperial tuners there. And it is not a modern style guitar. This is designed to harken back to a lot of those great funky guitars from the 60s that, like I said, had mojo. This is a guitar that has existed in my head for years, and thanks to the internet, thanks to the magic of the internet, I'm actually holding it, and it's actually real, and it actually makes noise when you plug it in, and I'm so excited. So the hope is to eventually have, a couple of these on hand at a given time to sell out. The option for customization will be available there too, and not just for stuff like this, but the ultimate goal is that if you want a guitar built, if there's some 16-year-old kid watching this right now who's in the same position that I was all those years ago, and you've got a guitar that's existed only in your head, and you only have, $423.87 and a stick of gum to throw at it. The hope is that by the time this video is published, that I will be your guy. So I realize that's, very optimistic. It's a big goal, especially, for a very, very small business, but the proof is in the pudding. Like, this beautiful, beautiful instrument is proof that it can be done. The more you know how to maintain and restore, take care of instruments like this that are in your care, the more money you'll save and the more money you can actually make. Because if you're the guy on your block that knows how to do that, or you're the guy in your dorm who knows how to set up and maintain guitars, people will come to you, because it's a lot easier to go to a guy you know yourself than go to Guitar Center and get charged an arm and a leg. My Reverb storefront is called Frugally Fab. Like, it's all about stretching your buck and getting the most bang for it. My Reverb page also has a sister YouTube channel, which we will link to at the end of the video, where you'll be able to see demos of this stuff in action, how it sounds, how it plays, full reviews, and not just reviews of the stuff that I'm going to be doing in-house, but also reviews of some of the other budget gear that's out there, letting you know if it's actually worth your investment. And also there'll be just some music and things in there, some collaborations with some other talented musicians on YouTube, and just some of my own stuff.
That's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for being relevant today.
Well, thank you guys so much for making me relevant, and thank you guys for watching, and stay groovy.
If people want to find more online?
Yes, you can find my Reverb storefront. You can just search Frugally Fab or Frugally Fab Guitars on Google. That'll turn it up right away. The Facebook page is also called Frugally Fab Guitars, and the YouTube channel is just called Frugally Fab.
Once again, I'm Philip. That's Seth. If you like what you see, like the video and subscribe. If you disagree with August on any of this, leave a comment below.
You're perfectly welcome to do that. I don't know everything.
And consider supporting us on Patreon.
They're good guys. Help them buy Chinese food.
Stay relevant.